All right. So again, it's a new concept, but it's really kind of the old classic concept, which is GRPs don't buy our products, human beings do, right? Or digital impressions don't buy our products, human beings do. A technology doesn't buy our product. The technology is the interface that enables us to connect with a human being that buys our product, becomes our customer, has a lifetime experience with us. So I'd like to just open up and actually with a leading question, which is if you were going to create a people-based marketing award, what would you want to see in the submissions that would really, you don't have to be specific about an example, but more generally, what kind of data or execution or ideas would you like to see that you'd like to award?
Some of this is going to be a little, I feel like I'm a little self-serving here because, as you mentioned,
We're on Madison Avenue, so
we have a concept. We have a concept called Geek Nerd Suit, as you pointed out, and it's our belief that you can't get to a people-based marketing system without tying together the data science, the technology, which we don't refer to as marketing technology, we refer to it as customer interaction technology, and the strategists, the suits, together. And it's really, really rare that we see an actual successful people-based marketing campaign that only involves even two of those. That they all three have to work together. So how do you use the technology to capture the customer's interaction? How do you use technology to actually let customers do something to you, not you do something to your customers? Then use that data that you've captured over time, progressively, to get better and better knowledge about individual customers' need states, about their wants and desires. By the way, I'm really I think it was I'm a very big fan of Disney, by the way, on this because of their ability to capture an entire family's need states over time. It's my perception that Disney really doesn't think about just this quarter's numbers. They think about next generation's numbers, which is really a amazing thing to do. One of our clients, Southwest, does the same thing, Southwest Airlines. And then the strategist. So I'd be looking for how all three have been tied together in order to change the customer experience to actually make it more likely that somebody's going to stick with you as a brand. We've been talking a lot in the previous sessions about advertising and things like that. The fact is that I think that overall what we're seeing is that you can't create a brand today without having a digital interaction component. Because of that, it's increasingly important and advantageous for brands to keep that first-party data, that first-party interaction, which means that media platforms are increasingly, for brands, are increasingly an acquisition tool. And the media knows that, and that acquisition cost is going up. So there's a cycle going on here that encourages people to create a brand, use the technology, use the data to keep people in your brand universe in order to avoid having to go out and acquire a company.
If I could just ask a follow-up question, because we're talking about connecting people with people in a way, but in a way you have to use a lot of technology in the back end to do that. So the example we shared in the write-up was what you did with McAfee, the antivirus software company, which included building a whole new data center for them. So that's like really not a very human thing, but it's what allows you to get to understanding and processing and managing the data that connects or creates those experiences.
Exactly, and it's kind of amazing since McAfee, along with a lot of the tech companies, have a lot of data. They're awash in data. Yet it's amazing how many of them haven't brought all of the data together to match the customer identifiers from one place to another. I have a feeling Spotify does this a little bit better than most. And that ability to tie that stuff together, it is technology, it is geek, it's what I do for a living, it's the geekdom. But it is increasingly easy today with the advent of AWS and Azure and other things, you can bring up customer data marts and tear them down overnight if you want. It is truly amazing. We are you no longer have to own your own data center, and marketing people, I think it was Gartner who said that next year the CMOs are going to in the United States will control more IT budget than the CIOs starting next year.
The CMTO.
Yep.
So just lastly, when you're diving into that stack and dealing with those servers and those databases, how do you keep the end user in mind? How do you keep thinking about the people, the human being connections there? How important is that to you? Is it just an afterthought, or is it part of the? How do you?
Well, in our case, we never approach a client interaction without having geeks, nerds, and suits all on the same team. So there's always, for every one of me from Illicit, there's always a suit like Michelle, who's my colleague over there, or Liam, who would be here, except there's a Hadoop conference across the town. So he's a nerd, so that trumped it today.
It's like the Comic-Con of data. Right?
Yeah, kind of, exactly. And the nerds in the suits on the team never talk about anything other than customer. So as a technologist, and from my perspective, as I said, we don't see technology as marketing technology. We see it as customer interaction technology. And so that's what keeps us grounded constantly in customers. We only talk about customer ID, basically.
So Brian, let's go back to the original question, which was, what would you expect or like to see in a people-based marketing award submission? What would excite you about someone breaking through and connecting people?
Yeah, I guess a couple things come to mind, Joe. I think you have to be a bit forward-looking and forward-leaning to be in the PBM or identity-based space right now. I mean, if you think about the last 15 years, right, the digital ecosystem has been built on cookies and device targeting, and there's a whole multi-billion-dollar marketplace that still exists, and sort of getting off that and shifting into a PBM identity-based, it's hard, you know, and most people are still learning. I mean, we're learning a lot at Spotify as we go here. Believe me, we haven't figured everything out. So I think one thought would be folks that are willing to take that leap into PBM, but you know, for publishers, for agencies, those that call themselves true people-based marketing, you know, end-to-end cycle on this. I mean, I think about what we try to do, and again, we still have ambitions here. We do a lot of pre-campaign insights around PBM. You know, so how are we providing the marketer or the agency on a brief around sort of what their strategy should be through good identity-based insights? How is that campaign, whether it's audio, video, display, otherwise, or something native on Spotify, how is that campaign executing? How is it running? And then having post-campaign results and insights to sort of fuel the next level of thinking. I mean, it's got to be an end-to-end cycle on this too. I think the word PBM is thrown around a lot in our business. It's super hard to do. You know, but I think over the next 3 to 5 years, we're going to be really getting away from a lot of cookies and devices and much more into identity. Hi.
Hi. So I believe we have Michael Krashansky, who's joining us from Helia and Havast. Okay. Yeah, it's all right. I'll be in the middle. That's a good thing. So you know, it's funny to me that we created a new acronym to talk about people, right? PBM. But you also use the word identity. And, you know, in the last few weeks, I heard people talk about identity resolution. So how good a job are we doing as an industry now of connecting those identity points, those pieces of data we gather from people in disparate places? It's great when you have first-party data of people logging in and having playlists or downloading McAfee software or staying at a Lowe's hotel. But when you don't, you have to rely on a lot of triangulation of other data about people. So I have 2 questions. The first one is, how do you know you're really looking at a whole person when you do that? Again, when you have first-party data, you see it, but...
Yeah, I think you have multiple levels there. I think for a platform like Spotify, we're fortunate, back to what Mark was saying, the user, the consumer is at the middle of the experience on Spotify. So when they join our service as a registered user, right? We're collecting age, gender, and email. But what the value that's returned there, forget about the ads business for a second or our own, because we're a global marketer as well, so we're doing a lot of these strategies on our own marketing side. But what you're getting back with giving us first-party data is this amazing experience around discovery, around recommendations. So the user has sort of gotten used to that, to say, hey, how can Spotify help me navigate through 40 million songs on the service? How can they surface relevant content to me? Well, we do that through algorithms, through machine learning, and through human curation, right? So every Monday, we're pushing a Discover Weekly playlist to our 140 million active users. I mean, think about the tech on that. That's really hard to do, sending an individual piece of content to 140 million people every week. On a daily level, we have what's called Daily Mix. Some of you that are on the Spotify platform know that we're sort of pushing a mix based on different genres out to each individual user. So for us, we're fortunate because we have a user experience that's very much identity-based. I think for others that don't have that direct connection to the consumer, the choice of the DMP, the data management platform, is critical. And there's a lot of them out there now, and some are built for publisher side, some are built for marketer agency side. You got to be very selective and really do your diligence on your DMP, because I think that will help inform your identity graph. So take an identity graph, take a device graph. I mean, the holy grail of PBM. I think it's matching those two.
So the identity for you is just the hook for you to know this is the individual we're looking at. And then your ability to look at, well, like you said, dynamically what music they're listening to over time allows you to understand their persona, who they are.
Well, exactly, Joe. I mean, for us, first-party data is terrific, and I think that's the start of this idea of people-based marketing. Our secret sauce at Spotify is the music intelligence, this idea of understanding people through music. It's amazing what we can know about everybody in this room through the music that they listen to. So the moods that they're in, the moments perhaps they're in, the activities that they're in. So we've been able to glean a lot of insights around people and activities from the music that you're listening to. So think about it on our end, marrying all the rich, high-fidelity first-party data that we have with the music intelligence, and we can then go to people like Mark and have a really interesting strategic conversation, particularly if you're dealing with an advanced, in this case, brand or agency that has really leaned into PBM. Like those conversations are fun for us.
Okay.
I'd agree entirely. The clients that we're dealing with, our clients today, increasingly don't want to place ads or place media in places where they can't get an enriched data on their customers. It's just not a thing. Given a choice, that's the last place we're going to go. We can't if we're just randomly placing an ad out there or placing an ad only on proposed demographics or something like that, the old models that you were talking about, it's just not something they want to do anymore. All of our clients are leaning into people-based marketing, and it's an ugly conversation if you have to go down that path, yeah.
So Michael, the first time I ever even really heard of people amassing an identity database on human beings was actually Havas. It was pre-Havas. It was Adnetic and the Artemis system that was merged into the company. And, to me, that was the precursor to true audience targeting, using, at that point, cookie IDs and later device IDs to understand when a person was somewhere that you could serve an impression to them. But it's that other part of understanding who they are. So talk a little bit about how you do it. We have a good case with Lowe's in the award that they won, but talk about Lowe's or another client, or how you bring it to life. How do you bring this moment, this cookie, this identity, this device, this graph, and put people behind it?
Yeah, no, really good question. So happy to be here. I oversee Havas Helia, which is our direct marketing agency, relationship marketing agency on behalf of Havas in the US. And I also play a complementary role where I oversee the data strategy for Havas Group here in North America. So I see a lot of what you just described, and this is really, really kind of a useful topic to talk about. So the two use cases that are discussed are around owning the personally identifiable information, so like the customer record. And then the other use case is owning an ID that's anonymized in the digital ecosystem. The kind of panacea is the combination of both, right? So the ability to connect your CRM to digital, so then you can not only communicate with your consumer directly through direct channels, SMS, email, direct mail, or in some cases customer match across the platforms, but now you're able to then upload that data and build out a lookalike sort of a scenario where you can then attract more of the consumers that you think are going to be more profitable to you. So the platforms that you described, Adnetic, which was one of the first originating DSPs, and Artemis, which was our data intelligence platform, lived in the anonymized space. And this is kind of before a lot of the privacy policies were in place. It's about almost 10 years ago. But the essence of that model was using the ad server, because the ad server has the ability to deliver every single ad across every single channel, including paid search to some extent, and using that ID and the ad server ID, whether it's DoubleClick or Seismic or the other ad servers, is an ID that actually historically, and even now to some extent, identifies an individual anonymously. And then taking that ID and matching it to the programmatic ecosystem, so then you can see historically from an attribution standpoint what drove that consumer to engage with a particular site or app or mobile. And then if you like their behavior and if you think their behavior is valuable to the brand, then you can quickly push it to Adnetic, which was partially owned by Havas at that time. And they could immediately execute a programmatic buy, so you would be retargeted. So you're like, oh, wait, I visited let's say a Lowe's website, and I searched for a booking in a particular area, let's say Boston, and you know what, I didn't book because the price was a little too high, or maybe I need to explore additional options. But all of a sudden you come off the platform, and we're like, you know what, that's a high value user because they actually went through the process of selecting a hotel in a particular geography. Let's remarket them. So that scenario has been around for a long, long time. But the question is, if you know that person beyond just that visit, right? If you know that once they authenticate on your site and you're like, oh, that's Michael Korshansky, he's a loyalty member, he stayed with us for, I don't know, 35 nights in the last year, not only do we want to remarket him, but we want to offer him a significant discount so he doesn't cross-shop to a competitor and, God forbid, likes their property better than ours. And so that's the panacea, right, is the ability to identify a consumer through not just the retargeting of, oh, what you did on my site, but also know the value that you add to the brand. And I think that's our mission. That's our mission. So the mission of Helia is to be able to bring first-party data to life in a way that is super beneficial to the advertiser and also relevant to the consumer.
Okay, so I think that's a great example. And, no, it was a lot. But again, if you read the write-up, you'll see how it was brought to life with Lowe's in the sense of creating these personas that you could follow these individuals throughout their journey. So my question, and it's for all of you, but I'd also like to know particularly Spotify's response to this, which is, in the example you give, when I touch a Lowe's or a McAfee or Spotify, I'm one persona in my life. But there are things I'm doing throughout my day or my week or my year that change my life stage or my needs all the time. How do you, or do you even need to understand the totality of, in this case, Joe Mandisi, or is it good enough to know that, you know, I stay at Lowe's 2 times a year, and it's mostly for business travel? Is that sufficient? Should we understand the full holistic complexity of what human beings are in order to create great experiences for them?
I'll start off from a media agency perspective, and on behalf of advertisers, we don't have permissible purpose to look beyond the immediate kind of connection or engagement that we have with consumers. So I'm not, if I'm representing a Lowe's hotel, I'm not supposed to know if that individual stayed in an SPG reward specifically. Even in an anonymized setting, that's something that is, for the most part, restricted because that's kind of breaching the privacy policy. However, the workaround, and this is what the third-party data providers have allowed for, is this notion of likelihood. So while I know that you are currently a Lowe's customer, and I know that you love Lowe's and you stay there all the time, but now all of a sudden I have a third-party indicator that I appended to the profile that says you are also likely to be part of the SPG rewards program. And while it's not 100% concrete, but but I have this likelihood. And the accuracy of that might be 60%, 50%, who knows, right? But the point is, how do you decision off that data? Like, do you do something about it? Because it could be a little creepy if all of a sudden right? So that's more on the strategy side of things. But the mechanics around kind of identifying a consumer across the entire ecosystem are there. There's the concern around accuracy, but I think the most important piece is on what do you do about it? And what are you going to say from a creative standpoint?
So that's
I would say, Joe, just to add, if you don't mind, I mean, I think it's accuracy and, as you mentioned, permission. I think there's some bad actors out there that we all have to be careful of as this thing gains steam, because I'm not sure in 2 or 3 years if we're going to be singling out people-based marketing or identity. It's just going to be what we do, right? If we were to rethink digital marketing back in 2000, 2001, I think we would, kind of fast forward right to this point now, and being able to really market to people. It's very intuitive, it's very logical. But I think as new ecosystems and markets take shape, you have some bad actors that we have to be careful of there as well. So it's something at Spotify that we spend quite a bit of time on, because going back to the user at the center of everything, you start losing trust of users, forget it. And then as a brand, you're dead.
I think, actually, if we were to reinvent digital marketing and what has become with our mobile devices and things like that from 20 years ago, I would hope that we go a little bit further than we are today, because I think a lot of our models today are really still based on the pushing content at customers, whether they want it or not. And there are a lot of other signals, as you were just mentioning, Michael, there are a lot of other signals that are not just in the internet mobile space. There are signals within, for example, our customer McAfee. We know whether or not a customer has a high-end machine or a low-end machine, whether they've tied mobile devices.
That will know everything about the device.
That will tell us a lot of things, like whether or not you are, as you talk about multiple personas, you may be a very tech-savvy mom who has a lot of devices and runs the devices for your household, but your family has accounts with McAfee to protect all of their devices, and we may speak to dad or the kids differently than you speak to mom, because mom is tech savvy and the kids may not be. Same thing with, say, Southwest, speaking about the real world, increasingly with mobile devices and with telemetry and other things in airports, we can tell whether or not somebody is spending a lot of time in layovers. For example, what do they do in layovers? Do they go to the restaurants? Do they tend to have dinner on the way home? Things like that. We can tell a lot about their traveling lifestyle, which is, again, there's a lot of reasons why you don't need. We had one client, by the way, who we had to convince. They were asking all of these questions about whether or not you scrapbooked and whether or not you liked fine cuisine and things like that, until we finally asked them, what are you using that for? And they said, we have no idea. Oh. It's like, well, then stop asking. That just makes no sense whatsoever. But when it comes to, say, a traveling experience and things like that, you want to know everything that happens in that traveling experience. From Southwest's standpoint, your experience is from when you book all the way until you get to your destination. And that's on Southwest to make sure that experience is as smooth as possible, no matter what happens, including TSA. So,
okay. I think I have room for maybe one more wrap-up question. Okay. So that's great, and I understand the legal reasons why we can't identify everything people do, and I understand the whole probabilistic versus deterministic aspect of organizing data that way, but it's still thinking of people as targets. And what I'm getting at is there a way for brands and agencies and platforms to start thinking about people in a more holistic sense? Because I think the thing is, we tend to objectify. We're still objectifying people as targets in the end. If they're an auto intender or a luxury traveler, I mean, it's nice that they're closer to your persona, but the reality is I'm a full person, and I want to come back to Spotify, because I think music is one of those things where you can actually type the user based on all kinds of emotional states throughout the day, not just at this moment in time, based on what they're listening to and how much can you leverage that?
I mean, we can leverage it a ton. I mean, think about the atomic unit of a song where it's 3-4 minutes long. We have 2 hours of engagement on Spotify a day from our users. So think about all those signals of all that usage of what's happening, particularly compared to long-form video that is 30 minutes, like 60 minutes in length. So, not only are we getting this from desktop and mobile and tablets, but we're getting this now from PlayStation devices, Xbox devices in your home. We're getting it from Chromecast and Samsung TVs and Sony televisions. So we've had this kind of, all of these devices now that we have an interesting device graph that we're putting together, music being at the core. And that's one of the things, our submission for Kia, we were able to do something very creatively around playlist targeting, around branded moments. And so we've literally built native ad products now around this identity people-based marketing concept, and we're just starting. So we've got a lot to learn, but we're having some fun with folks like him and agencies that really want to lean back into us.
Okay, well, I think that's a good introductory panel to our first ever People-Based Marketing Awards. I think we actually have the awards now, so we can hand them out. There's a human being, a person who's going to hand them to me, Maya. She's ID number 675432. And, seriously, I'd like to ask you all to submit ideas, stories throughout the year, but certainly, hopefully, next year, other great examples. We don't have a rule for repeat winners, so if you guys are still kicking butt, we do repeats and three-peats. We've been known to do that with our other awards, so.
We'll be back.
Okay. All right. Are we going to do this, or? Come down and yeah. Okay. All right. We're kind of ad hoc here. We're improvising, but we're humans. Thank you.
Thank you.
First ever. Sure, we'll work out a way to get it.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Thanks for a great panel. Hope you all enjoyed the People-Based Marketing Awards. But we have to move right along, fortunately or unfortunately. Let them take a picture real quick. Oh, am I in it? I shouldn't be. Okay, all right. Well, thank you for that. And as I said, we have to move right along. It's time for the afternoon session.